good afternoon to everyone. In today's lecture, we will be continuing the previous topic that we have started, that is Introduction to Relational Database Management System. So, in the previous lecture, we discussed what is basically a relational database. Once again, to recap that, we talked that relational database or RDBMS is a type of database in which all the information is maintained in the form of a table. So, here we can see one of the example where we are having a table having the columns roll number, first name, middle name, last name, date of birth, gender, house number, street name, city, state, and pin code. So this is the given table. And remember what we said, a table here will be called as a relation. And we are having multiple rows corresponding to each record. For example, just like here it is marked, each record is called a tuple. So here we are having a tuple. Here we can see, here we have a tuple. So tuple is basically a record. Now, we will be talking about database key. What is a key? In order to ensure that each row or the tuple in the database table is uniquely identified. Every row is uniquely identified. That is the first thing. For example, if we are having a table and in that table we are having multiple rows. So corresponding to each row, there should be a unique row or unique tuple. Secondly, establish and enforce various types of integrity within the database. Later on, we will see that there are different types of integrity constraints which are enforced on the database. So we need a database key so that we can establish and enforce various types of integrity within the database. That is the second need. Third says help establish the relationship between tables. Now here the important word to notice that we are going to establish relationship between the tables. Okay, so why do we need to establish relationship between tables? Because imagine that if we are having multiple tables, let us take an example of just two tables and you want to fetch record from more than one table. Now, in order to fetch record from more than one table, you need to establish relationship between the tables. So, this relationship will be established only if you are having a common key between the tables. So, here we have discussed what is the need of a database key. Now let us look at what are the different types of database keys. What are different types of database keys? Okay, so we will look at the different types. So here we can see that we are having a super key, we are having candidate key, we are having primary key, we are having composite key, we are having foreign key, we are having surrogate key. Also, we are having secondary or alternate type of key. Now, each key has its own significance. If we talk about super key, candidate key, each of the key. So each key has a particular role. Now we will see in depth that what is the attribute, what is the main feature of each type of key. First of all, let us talk about a super key. What is a super key? A super key is a super key. So we are here, we'll be talking about a super key. It is a set of one or more attribute that allows us to uniquely identify a row or a tuple in a relation. For example, if you are having a table and you uniquely want to identify each tuple and tuple is known as a row, then in that case, you need to have a super key to uniquely identify. Suppose that if you are having a table, you are having this table, and in this table, there are different columns. Okay. And there are different rows in the table. Okay. So here we can see that there can be, this is first, this is the second column, this is the third column, this is the fourth column, and this is the fifth column. And if you want to uniquely identify each and every tuple, how many tuples here we are having? This is the first tuple, this is the second tuple. There can be any number of tuples depending upon the question that is given to us. Now, so what is a super key? If you uniquely want to identify each tuple, so you need to have a super key. So this super key can be alone this A column, or this can be a combination of A plus B. Now, how will you decide? How will you decide that how many fields are required in order to have a super key? Okay, so we will see, you must have heard about primary key. Primary key is a type of key that is used to uniquely identify each tuple. So primary key is generally known as minimal super key. Primary key is known as the minimal super key. Now, what are some facts that you should remember about super key? A super key specifies uniqueness property of a row. It is used to identify the uniqueness property, how one particular row is different from that of other. So this is the basic characteristic. Every relation has one default super key. Which is one default super key? The set of all attributes. The set of all the attributes. Why we are saying that at least one default key will be there? Because in certain situations, you may be having a column that is not able to uniquely identify the tuple alone. Okay, in that case, you are taking one more attribute. And in case even if you are having two columns and even then it is not getting uniquely identified, then you are taking more attributes. So at most, the record will be unique when you combine all the attributes of that relation. Because in the case of relational database, there is no point of having the same tuple twice. So there is no point of having the same tuple twice. It is not allowed. So in that case, what you are going to do, there must be at least one attribute that is different. So this is one of the important fact about super key. We are just talking about the basics here. Later on, we will see in detail a candidate key. This is the next type of key we are talking about, candidate key. Okay. Now, what is a candidate key? A candidate key is a minimal super key that can identify each row or tuple of a given relation uniquely. So we have seen that what is the significance of a super key. Now we are talking about a candidate key is a minimal super key. So candidate key has minimum number of attributes that are definitely needed to establish a row uniqueness in a given relation. So you may be having multiple keys that are having the functionality of uniquely identifying each tuple in the database. So those set of keys are the candidate keys. So this candidate key is generally known as the minimal super key because this is a key which can uniquely identify each record. Now, talking about the next key, Let us first look at some of the features. So what are the features of candidate key? It identifies each tuple uniquely. We have discussed removing any attribute from the candidate key fails in identifying each tuple uniquely. Very important point here is to note that if you remove any attribute, in that case, it will no longer remain the candidate key. It is a candidate key because sometimes what is happening, you are having more than one key that is combined to form the candidate key. And if you remove one of the attribute from that table, then in that case, it will not be used to uniquely identify. Also, we have discussed that it must be unique. This feature we have already discussed that it should be unique. Identify each tuple uniquely. It should not remove any attribute. Okay. The value of candidate can never be null. Again, a very important that it can never be null. Because we all know that primary key cannot be null because it is used to identify records in the table. Similarly, candidate key can never be null. Now talking about primary key. A primary key is a constraint in a table which uniquely identifies each record in the database table by enabling one or more the column in the table as primary key. So what is the key objective? The key objective is to uniquely identify each record in the table, so that we can differentiate that yes, this tuple is different from that of the other. For example, what can be the unique values? Your Aadhaar ID, that can be the primary key. Your voter ID, that is again a unique number, that can be a primary key. Also, your enrollment number is unique. It's different for each record. Suppose you are having a table and in that table there is no unique value. Okay, for example, there is no enrollment number value. There are only the columns as name. You are having the column name. Okay, name of students can be same. For example, if you are having column like branch, so you're having a column branch. In this case, these records are not having any primary key currently. Now, what are certain properties? Primary key should be chosen such that its attributes are never or very rarely changed. Also, it should consist of either a single attribute or small number of attributes. So if you are having a single attribute that can uniquely identify entire record, that's fine. Then it is another type of case when you are not having any attribute that can uniquely identify a particular record. Then in that case, you can have a combination of keys that is used to uniquely identify each record in the table. In the given example, you can see that you are having roll number, name, age, and GPA. So for each tuple, the roll number is different. Here you can see for each student, the roll number is different. Right? So you can consider roll number as the primary key. Okay. Now, talking about the composite key. What is a composite key? Composite key is a primary key consisting of two or more columns that uniquely identify rows in a relation. Now, earlier also we have discussed that in case if you are having a single key that can uniquely identify, that's fine. But under the circumstances where you are not having any specific key that is unique, for example, in the given section table, you can see that section names are repeating. Section A is getting repeated, section B is getting repeated. Similarly, department ID is also getting repeated. Here you can see that this D01 is repeated. Then you are having D02, D03, D05 is getting repeated. So this cannot be the primary key alone. In that case, you need a composite primary key. That is a combination of more than one key. Now talking about secondary or alternate key, these are the keys that are the candidate keys that are left unimplemented or unused. You have not implemented these keys after implementing the primary. So the leftover keys are the alternate key or the secondary key. Now, this is what we have discussed. We have talked about keys. We will talk more in detail about the different types of keys, what are the functionalities of the keys. This is for today's lecture. Thank you so much for listening to me.